Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan and very excited to introduce you to Lynne McTaggart. Lynne McTaggart is one of the central authorities on the new science and consciousness. She is the award-winning author of 7 books, including the worldwide bestsellers The Field, The Intention Experiment, The Bond, and The Power of 8. Lynne is also the co-founder of the international magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You, as well as the health expo Get Well, and she is the architect of the Intention Experiments, which is a web-based global laboratory to test the power of intention to heal our world. Lynne is highly sought after as a public speaker. She is the host of the Living the New Science podcast, which I highly recommend, as well as Conversations with Lynne McTaggart, which you can find on YouTube. And she is consistently listed as one of the top 100 most spiritually influential people in the world. Welcome, Lynne. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
It's my pleasure, Vered.
Would you be willing to help us get started today by sharing a little bit about your background? How did you get into this pretty incredible line of work that you now do?
I got kind of accidentally waylaid. I am an investigative reporter by background and a journalist and author. And I was working on that newsletter you mentioned, What Doctors Don't Tell You, with my husband back in the 1990s. And I kept coming across very interesting studies showing that things like spiritual healing work, acupuncture works. And I kept thinking to myself, if you can have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, that completely undermines how we believe the world works. It requires a completely new paradigm to understand that. So I thought I would investigate this, and I talked a publisher into doing this book. And I thought it would be very easy, that I would just go and talk to a couple of frontier scientists working in consciousness research. They would tell me some things about human energy fields. I'd write it up, and that would be the end of it. And that was not the end of it. As I started researching and speaking to these frontier physicists, biologists, even Dr. Robert John, the late Robert John, who was the former dean of engineering at Princeton University, had been working on the power of the mind to affect very sensitive electronic equipment. And their discoveries, in my understanding, were each a tiny piece of what compounded into a new science, a completely new view of the world. And so I had to study quantum physics with them. I had to interview them, many of them 20, 30 times, and piece together their findings, but also synthesize the whole into this new view of the world, because scientists aren't very good about, number one, speaking in plain English, they talk in math, and number two, putting this, moving beyond their own experimental evidence to try to say, what does this all mean? That job got left to me. So that's what I did with my book, The Field. But there was a lot of little unfinished business in there. And one of the big pieces of unfinished business was the idea that thoughts are things that affect other things. There had been a lot of evidence about that in the studies I looked at. So I wanted to know, how far can we take this? Are we talking about tiny little, effects like affecting a quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? And I was also intrigued by the idea of what happens when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time. So that became the intention experiment. At that point, I had lots of readers around the world, still do, but The Field was in 30 languages. And I also knew lots of scientists working in consciousness research. So I thought if I just put them together, I'd have the largest laboratory in the world. So this is what we've done. We've done experiments since 2007, 40 of them now, everything from trying to make seeds grow faster to purifying water, to lowering violence in war-torn or violent areas, to healing someone of post-traumatic stress disorder. And of those 40, 35 have shown measurable positive, mostly significant effects. So this is how I got into the whole thing. And I got truly hijacked. Every so often I would think, yeah, I'll go back to my investigative reporting. And it never worked out that way. I just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this extraordinary subject. So the message changed the messenger.
Thank you, Lynn, for sharing that. And I honor you for trusting your intuition and following that. Certainly, there have been many blessings. And one of them is for myself and a good friend of mine. We did an intention group for her. She was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I started with a smaller group, ended up being about 300 people, and had a great positive effect, as you know, not only on her, but also on those of us that sent that love, that intention towards her. So thank you.
Well, this is what I see all the time because after these intention experiments, I started scaling it down. And it was really, again, by accident. I wanted to see what would happen if we had groups of 8 or so, as I said to my husband one day. We'll just put people in groups of 8 or so and have them send healing intention to someone in the group with a health challenge. This was supposed to be just an exercise we would do in a workshop. And what I didn't expect was these extraordinary remote healings and also in-person healings. When people would be assembled in these workshops, they'd send an intention to someone for 10 minutes, and that person would be healed. The first group we did, somebody got healed of cataract, somebody got healed of depression, somebody got healed of arthritis, got greatly improved, and on it went. So what I expected to be a very mild effect, like getting a facial, turned out to be life altering. And I've seen that now thousands of times. But you pointed out something very important, which is really the focus of my work now, which is the effect on the senders is every bit as extraordinary. There's an interesting mirror effect that happens both in the big intention experiments and also in the Power of 8 groups.
Lynn, would you be willing to share an overview of the field and a little bit more about this concept that thoughts are things and that they really do make a difference?
Absolutely. So what I discovered in this extraordinary journey in uncovering this new science was, number one, the idea that certain scientists understood that the scientific story that we've been told is really out of date, is wrong. People think of science as this finite and ultimate truth, but science is just a story. And new chapters get written with every new discovery and oftentimes rewrite the old chapters that have come before. And what we have understood is that we've all been essentially defined, and we've defined our world by the ideas and discoveries of Isaac Newton. That's more than 300 years ago. And he discovered he described a very well-behaved universe of separate objects operating according to fixed laws in time and space. And that idea got amplified by the discoveries and thoughts of Charles Darwin, who was influenced by population explosion at the time. And he believed there just wasn't enough to go around. So life must proceed through struggle. So he didn't coin it, but it became a leitmotif for him, the whole idea of survival of the fittest. So these two ideas together, the idea that we are separate entities, well-behaved entities, and we are competitive individuals. So we have this highly competitive, individualistic nature has basically been the paradigm by which we've lived all these years. Now, this new science discovered, number one, we are not separate. We are all part of a quantum energy field. I call the field. And we know that we're actually not solid and stable little things. We are, every part of us, every subatomic particle is a vibrating packet of energy, sending other energy back and forth like an endless game of tennis. And in that little tennis game, virtual particles get created, and that they last for less than the blink of an eye, but they create a quantum field. So there's two really important elements. Number one, we are all energy. Our energy, our subatomic energy, is in touch with every other subatomic energy because subatomic particles are also waves. Waves have an infinite capacity of storage ability, and they can, when they bump into another wave, they take on its information. Waves also go on theoretically to infinity. So if you think about all of this together, you understand that we have a mechanism to describe why we can be in touch with all information in the cosmos, why thoughts could affect other things, why thoughts are another form of energy. Now, amplifying that were the discoveries of the late, great Fritz Albert Popp. That first work was done by a physicist called Hal Puthoff, who just described and understood the implications of what has been known to every quantum physicist since the 1920s, that there is a field. And it's now been demonstrated in CERN. There is indeed a quantum field of which we are all part. But Popp understood and discovered that we are all sending out a tiny current light, all living things. And other living things are sending light back to us synchronicitously, as though we're having a conversation of light. Studies that have been done on healers find that these light emissions increase when we are sending healing intention. So light is somehow involved in thoughts. We also know from so much evidence that thoughts actually do affect other things. They're not just things, they're things that affect other things. They're trespassers, I like to put it. And they go out and they affect other people and things. And we know from hundreds of studies, thousands of studies, including my own now, that thoughts can affect reality. So Popp's discoveries were really important. So was the work of the late Carl Pribram. All of these great scientific pioneers, many of them have passed. Pribram was a neuroscientist who discovered the limbic system. So he was really noted, but he's also discovered something else. There is no precise address for things like memory. We always think of our brains as housing all of our thoughts. They're all stuck inside here. He did an amazing study on rats, teaching them a complex maze, and then proceeding, this is quite disgusting, this experiment done back, I think, in the 60s. He and his colleague, Carl Lashley, proceeded to burn these poor rats' brains bit by bit with his wife's curling iron. Terrible, days before animal rights. But here's the point of this awful experiment. Even though they kept removing rats' brains from these poor experimental animals, no matter how much they did, it affected their motor skills, but it did not affect their memory of the run. So they always understood and remembered that complex maze. So Pribram came out from that saying, wait a minute, memory and other cognitive elements of the brain must not be housed inside the brain. They must be outside, and the brain is much more like a receiver transmitter mechanism. And that certainly fits with the information we know about near-death experiences and coma victims. When that brain isn't working, and people still describe experiences when they were out, and that brain was not working, they were conscious of everything going on around them. Many, many cases of that. So that, plus all of the work that's been done on the power of intention, demonstrating that thoughts affect everything from complex electronic equipment done at Princeton University to everything from single-celled animals to full-fledged human beings. Many, many, many studies showing healing, intention, and those kinds of things work on everything like that. And there have been, thousands of studies of this, that we also recognize that we have extraordinary powers we have not tapped into, not since indigenous tribes. Once Newton came along, that essentially ripped us out of a sense, a magical connection with our world. And my work has ended up morphing into rediscovering those powers in humans and teaching it to them. The power of intention. We also have, and there was much, much scientific evidence on the ability to see beyond our senses with remote viewing, the ability to travel back and forth in time. One of the pieces of work that I now do a lot with my husband, Brian Hubbard, author of The Untrue Story of You, about time being an energy, not a dimension, and how we live with that energy within us, particularly if we've been traumatized or abused or, well, let's put it this way, everybody has issues to get over with in their past. So we look at things like that. What has been the thread through all of this, as I say, is that we have powers beyond measure, the power to heal ourselves, each other, and the world. And we just need to relearn how to tap into all of these things.
Thank you, Lynn. And I appreciate that you brought up our traumas from the past, how those experiences that we've had, and perhaps even through the lineage, how they affect us, as you shared kind of in the example of the rats with, where do we store the memory? And one of the things that I see in my work as a hypnotherapist, and I use a variety of modalities to move energy, such as EFT tapping, havening, and a variety of other modalities, is that when we change the energy in the body, and of course the energy that's projected, radiated out around our body, that things change in our physical world. And sometimes very quickly, instantly. And so, since this is a podcast about mindset, about how our beliefs impact our physical reality, our perception of what our reality is, would you be willing to share a little bit more about the power of beliefs?
Absolutely. I mean, this is really a territory that it really moves into my husband, Brian Hubbard's work. And essentially, his motto, his koan of his book is "The thought thinks the thinker." And what he has described in his book is that time is essentially an energy. And I certainly look at all of that with physics, demonstrating that there's no place in the brain where time is understood or exists. The same part of the brain understands or decodes information about the past as the future. So that's really interesting. And there's no place in the brain that really processes time. So number one, that. Number two, we have different kinds of selves, says Brian. And one of the selves is our psychological past. And that is built up from the things that happen to us that are not understood. And they sort of invade us and become the us we present to the world, like an unwanted guest. And so the work we do together is combining his work, which he calls time light therapy that he developed to heal his own abusive past, and my work, which is the power of intention to go back and forward in time. And we put that together and we go back and heal those situations with the power of intention. So beliefs are the things that we come to think of as true, that are usually situations that happen to us. Let's say a teacher told us we were stupid. I'll give you a perfect example of this. Sam Keen. Sam Keen is a philosopher. When he was growing up, his mother asked him to do something mechanical, and he failed at it. So she said, "You're not good at these mechanical things, are you?" And that became a fixed belief in Sam Keen's mind. So he said, well, I better not do anything like that in my life. I'll become a philosopher. And he became a very reasonable philosopher. But once he got to be an adult, he took a test, an aptitude test, and it showed that his ability in mechanical things, engineering, for instance, was in the beyond genius place. So let's just ponder for a moment with great sorrow all of the great inventions that Sam Keen probably would have made if mom hadn't said, you're not good at mechanical things. So it's our beliefs get created by the unfinished business in our lives. That's how people believe nothing good ever happens to me. I'm terrible at this. I'm stupid at math. Nobody loves me. All of those things have to do with oftentimes situations we haven't fully understood or lost our power over. That's most of the time lost our power over. And that is the work we do to try to sort that out.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm absolutely excited about is how to help people, as you do, to set intentions for themselves and for others, and to release the resistance to that. So, what can you share with people about how to set intentions, how to utilize some of the research that you have learned about how to make it most effective for themselves and others?
Okay, thank you, Vera. This is the subject of lots of courses that I do. So, for instance, to tell people everything about how to use intention is usually the subject of 10 to 12 hours of lectures by me, plus lots of follow-up. But I'll give you one tip. I mean, first of all, most people believe that you're only intending when you sit down and you have that power thought in the morning. So you're meditating, you have the power thought, you send it out, and you think that's the only thing that universe hears. But we are leaky buckets. We are sending out, remember, with every thought we have about 70,000 thoughts that we have every single day. And when I start monitoring my students, I find that most of their thoughts, as most people in the world's thoughts are negative about themselves and judgmental about other people, or just a lot of flotsam and jetsam that's usually negative running through their heads. And so people aren't very directed in their intentions because all of that mendacious thinking, that also becomes your life's intention. That's what you're sending out to the world. That's what you're affecting all the time. If people don't believe other people don't feel your thoughts, try it sometimes. Stop sending negative thoughts to the people you don't like at work or in your family and start sending loving intention. See what happens. So there's the one thing about becoming much more conscious, and the other little bit that I will share that I teach all the time is being specific. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make. They usually think, no, I can't be really specific because I will limit the universe, as though the universe doesn't have any power. Things might come to me in a better way if I ask for anything specific. So they don't, and that's a big urban myth, the idea that you shouldn't be specific. Secondly, people ask for big overarching intentions like world peace or I want to be rich. And actually, they don't necessarily want to be rich. What they want is to have a different job. That's usually it. Or they want more free time and they figure having lots of money will do it. Or they want more time with their child or their grandchild or whatever. Or they want to pursue a hobby. They don't necessarily want more stuff and lots of money. They just want more time. So, or a new career or life purpose. So I usually get people to tell the universe exactly what you want, and be very specific. The more specific, the better. If you want to heal the second toe on your right foot, send an intention to do that. And so that's one of the many ways that I work. I have 13 keys in my upcoming Power of Eight Intention Masterclass, which is a once a year class I run once a year starting February 5th. And we not only teach for 6 sessions, but 2-hour sessions, but I also put people into groups. My team put all of our students into groups in their time zone, in their particular preferred time of meeting, and they meet together every week for a year. And then I have intention clinics to make sure they're doing everything right and put them through essentially what I like to call intention boot camp. But it's that, Vered, that's the real key element here. The people who do the work, who meet every week with their group, those are the people who experience, pretty much 100% of them will experience at least one major life-changing event.
And it's fascinating research, Lynn. And what comes up for me right now is how important is our state, how we feel. Because in the groups, when we are sending compassion, when we're imagining people fully healed in any aspect of their life, how does that love, if you will, impact the field and our results?
Okay, well, first of all, yeah, your heart-centeredness is really important. I talk about that and I teach some methods of doing that. You have to, it's not something that comes from your head. Maybe you design it in your head in the sense of the wording, but the real intention comes from your heart. And it's how does this impact the field? Well, there are many ways that I think Power of Eight groups work, and I studied them in every possible direction with my book, The Power of Eight. So there is the fact of intention and how that works. There is a group effect. Psychologists have called it collective effervescence. Magical things happen in groups. And they've even been shown to heal trauma. So groups are really powerful. So there's all of that. But what I find is probably the key element here. Oh, and also there is the altruism effect, because most of the time, when you're in a Power of Eight group, you're intending for someone else, yet the senders heal just as much as the receivers. I've had many instances of that. I've had Andy Spiros, who was stuck trying to find a new job until she did an intention for a young boy who had tried to commit suicide. And lo and behold, the next week, out of the blue comes somebody calling her up about a perfect job, a dream job. We had somebody else who was stuck trying to write a book, Lisa Wheeler, does an intention for someone in the group, gets off of herself, as I usually tell people when they're stuck, get off of yourself and intend for someone else. When she did, as soon as she did, out of the blue, she meets somebody who helps her through a book project that was completely stuck, going nowhere. She meets somebody who turns out to be a book coach, coaches her through the whole process. She gets a bestseller. Another guy, Wes, only part of a 10-minute intention, had been depressed for something like 35, 40 years. He does this intention for someone who has cancer. The next day he wakes up and it's like Scrooge on Christmas morning. He is suddenly full of love. He can't wait to get started with exercise, doing other work. He had literally a vision, imagining himself back when he was 19, before he got drafted to go into the Vietnam War, which was the source of all of his pain and depression, the trauma after that. And this vision, during this vision, this 19-year-old self turned to him and said, don't worry, there's still time. And he is a different person these days. He's doing exercise, as I say, he's studying courses, he's involved with his church, he's writing. This was a guy who could barely get up in the morning. So altruism is the piece. But then there's something really important, which we found when we did brainwave studies with Life University, the largest and most prestigious chiropractic university in the world, did a series of neuroscience studies, EEG studies with Power of Eight groups of volunteers who had never even done this stuff before. We put an EEG cap on one member of the senders, and we found very quickly, almost immediately, the parts of the brain that make us feel separate, that we interpret the world as being separate from, like the parietal lobes, which sit right here. They help us navigate through space. They tell us what's me and what's not me. They were turned way down, and so were the parts of the right frontal lobes involved in worry, doubt, negativity. All of this dialed way down. So the bottom line was these brainwave signatures were nothing like meditation. They were almost identical to University of Pennsylvania studies of Sufi masters during chanting and Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer. These are people in a state of ecstatic oneness, like a mystical state. And so that piece is a really important piece too, about why this stuff works, because getting into that state of oneness, I believe, is when we suddenly experience the field. You know, we're in the field all the time. We don't feel that we're in the field. We feel like separate little billiard balls bouncing around in space. But we suddenly, in that state of oneness, we get to feel what oneness feels like. And that, I think, is the miracle zone.
Absolutely fascinating. And Lynn, what would you want every person on this earth to know, perhaps every baby to be taught?
I would like them to be taught another view of science. I have science of connectedness and a science of miracles, essentially, that they aren't miracles. They are our inherent human capacity. We have the capacity to heal. We have the capacity to see beyond our senses. We have the capacity to forecast, to go back and forward in time. We have all of these amazing capacities, and we just need to learn to cultivate them again. And so this is all about really the ability for us to reclaim our, for us to reclaim our inherent human powers that have been denied to us, that many authority figures have told us do not exist, and that have limited us. And it's more important than ever to understand and reclaim these, because we're seeing a major shift in our world right now. And we're seeing a collapse of the old way of doing things in every aspect of our lives. It's not going to go back to what it was. We need to create something new. And this is a really important part of it. When we understand that we're not individuals competing for survival, when we understand that we're all part of this giant field, that we were made to be connected, we were made in every aspect of our lives to be connected, then we'll start creating a different and better world. So I think it starts with understanding that inherent human capacity we all have to heal ourselves, each other, and the world.
Thank you, Lynn. I share in your wish, and I believe that, it starts with us feeling connected with ourselves, and a way to do that is to truly tune into the fact that we are connected, and that when we send love, we receive love, and that we all have a role to play in the future of our planet and humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all have to. I mean, it is time for everybody to step up the plate. Absolutely.
So, Lynn, how can our listeners access your courses, learn more about your work so that they can apply these principles and we can see more of this shift happening in our world?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So my website is lynnmctaggart.com, and you'll find some free tools. If you sign up to my website, there's how to set up a Power of Eight group. I have a community as part of my website, and you'll get some tools there too. You can join the community and just advertise for a Power of Eight group in your time zone. You can do that also on my Facebook page, group page, Connecting and Healing Through the Power of Eight. There is a weekly blog I do, a twice monthly podcast where I'm speaking alone. I'm also speaking to a lot of other people in my field, like Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, etc. I have an upcoming live event. I do some free live events on Facebook. I have an upcoming one with Lee Carroll and Joe Dispenza and Sue Mortar in the next weeks. And for my courses, my Power of Eight Intention Masterclass, my big once-a-year class, is kicking off February 5th. So if you just come on my website under courses, you'll find it. And you'll see many other courses that I run, intermediate and beginners and advanced courses online. And I'm venturing out there on workshops too. And we do retreats as well. We'll be doing one in what essentially was the runner-up to Downton Abbey site here in the UK. We'll be doing this next year, this amazing country estate in 3,000 acres of land in Yorkshire. So I'll be announcing that hopefully soon.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for all of the work that you do in our world. It's so important, and I'm so grateful to you and to the many partners, if you will, that you have in this work, like Joe Dispenza, Sue Mortar, Greg Bright, Bruce Lipton, and many others like them, because I believe that when this work is anchored in science, it is undeniable. And that is one of the many gifts that you have offered to our world, is to suspend any disbelief and just imagine a world that could have even more love, that could have even more connection, even more solutions, and be brighter in every way for us personally and together. So once again, thank you, Lynn.
You're very welcome.